Hey everybody, it's Adam Martin, F5 Project, coming to you on the F5 Recovery Podcast today. In our new location, I got Scott College with me and Kirsten Huovinen, and we have a special guest, Maggie Freleng from the Wrongful Conviction Podcast. First, I want to thank our sponsors, which is obviously F5 Project, the Ridge Treatment and Reentry Center, GoAwayBear.com. Go Away Bear! and Heat Transfer Warehouse and Shirts from Fargo. We appreciate it. And then obviously all our subscribers that pay that $9.99 monthly subscription to make sure that we're producing content. Yeah. So I think that's a good intro.
Yeah, great. Well done.
Great job.
All right,
Ricky
cool.
doesn't need to come anymore.
No, you know what?
Ricky needs to come.
So if you're watching the video on this is our new podcast station. This is compliments of H&I Nutrition, Metroflex, John Ostos. This is his spot, and he's been awesome enough to let us start coming over here. So we should have better audio and better video and stuff like that. So appreciate it. Thanks for tuning in. Today we have a special guest, Maggie Freleng from the Wrongful Convictions Podcast. I met Maggie when I was interviewed on her podcast. It was probably a few months ago. It was specifically around the wrongful conviction of Cassandra Black Elk here in North Dakota. There hasn't been a lot of movement with those types of cases where people have been wrongfully convicted, but we have found a couple. Maggie was one of them. She was wrongfully convicted of killing her baby. And and maybe we'll get into it more when we start talking to Maggie. But it was a game changer for me because it happened like when I walked into the prison and I met her, it was crazy, like how far into the system that this had to go before it was like spotlighted. So, and Maggie was helping tell that story. So today, Maggie, welcome to the F5 Recovery Podcast. Thank you for joining us. Thanks for letting me be on your podcast. I appreciate you being here.
Thanks for having me, y'all.
Yeah, this is going to be awesome. So Maggie, I gave a little bit of an intro. Can you share, you're a Pulitzer Prize winner, right?
Congrats.
I did some quick ADHD research on her, and I was just like getting more and more infatuated as I was like getting into it. So Maggie, why don't you just take a little bit of time, tell us who you are, where you came from, how you got to where you're at today.
Oh boy. Okay. Well, where I am today, I am the host of Wrongful Conviction. I'm a Pulitzer Prize winning journalist and producer. And I got here, I guess, I always wanted to help people. And I guess that turned into journalism when I was doing English. And I had to do a creative writing class, and I'm not very good at creative writing. And I was like, you know what? I want to do facts, and news became a thing. And I saw the way that using my platform to help elevate stories of people who can't get their voices heard, how impactful that was. So that was really my career trajectory. And it really took off around 2012. It's kind of crazy to see all these things happening today, but it really took off in 2012 around the Occupy Wall Street time in New York. I was young and that was happening. And I just started seeing the struggles of all these different marginalized and lower income people. So it's kind of really crazy to see that full circle today in Zuccotti Park with all the students and stuff like that. So that's kind of where I started.
That's cool. I love that. That is like, I've never actually met like a Pulitzer Prize winner.
Yeah.
Honestly, I don't think I even know any journalists outside of, the people we call journalists in Fargo that like they're not really even reporting facts. They're just like, they're just like, it's just clickbait. It's the same people who fucking did mugshots of me. So I'm not a big fan of theirs. So it's cool to actually meet someone who's like a journalist that actually seeks out the truth and is using their voice to uplift others. What's out of all the stuff that you reported on, there's got to be a couple times where that like it was like a moment for you that was just like a game changer in your head, and like it really just proved to you that you're doing what you're supposed to be doing.
Wow. At this moment, I can't think of a particular moment, but it was probably really early on. I mean, I was doing journalism, right when I was 18, 19 in college. And then I stayed in it. I mean, it's really rare for people, I'm sure, as y'all know, to want to do something at 18 and continue to do it all the way to 35. So somewhere along the line, I must have known that this is what I was supposed to be doing. But I really think the access journalism gave me to other people and their stories. And I felt like that access was such a privilege when people let you into their lives. And, I think, again, going back to that 2012 era, I was super young. I mean, I was a college kid, and I remember specifically covering the fight for 15. If you don't remember, that was the fight to have the minimum wage changed to $15 an hour. And this was in New York, but of course it spread around the country. And I remember I was talking with these single moms who worked at McDonald's and just could not make ends meet on a McDonald's salary, busting their ass 7 days a week, trying to pay for health care. And I think that was really probably when I was like, these stories need to be heard by everybody all over the place, not just in this little pocket of New York where they're protesting to be able to make a livable wage. So I think talking to those women who we couldn't have been more different, and valuing their stories just made me really want to keep doing that and doing it right. As you just mentioned, some journalists aren't really journalists, and I really value the privilege I have in sharing and telling people's stories.
Yeah. I wish that I wish I could just name drop a bunch of people that I own, like they say, but Scott always shakes his head whenever I'm going to like expose someone for being a shitty journalist, but I'm not going to do that. Yeah. So I love that because when I read up on you, there was at least the pieces that I read on what had to do with like moms, single moms, pay, stuff like that. And we just went to South Dakota and I got to be part of a re-entry simulation or whatever, which was funny because it was with a bunch of correctional officers and like people, law enforcement. And they're like, oh, we're going to do this re-entry survey so we can understand what it's like to be, someone justice impacted coming out. Yep. And I looked around the room. I was like, bet I got this. I've done this in like real life. And so they had like bus tickets, and there was a jail, and you had to go all these places. And I ended up in jail because I didn't do my UAs or something like that, which was like, all right, I'm going to go back to prison anyways. I'm just going to make as much money as I can before I go. But the reason I bring that up is because as I was going through that, I was like, man, I couldn't imagine, being a single mom who just got out of prison, who's trying to get a job, who has to go take now she has to produce 2 bus tickets for her and her kid or whatever. She can't have daycare. She doesn't have insurance. She got to pay to go to take a UA, and then she's got to meet with her like all that stuff that I went through. And I was just like, man, we should, and it didn't hit me until I read, your reporting on what you were talking about with the single moms in the pay of $15 or whatever, that there needs to be a different category of probation for single moms. Because I mean, this is partly why the homeless shelters are filled with guys, because they can be more nimble. They can get across town a lot faster than a mom who's got to drag 3 kids with her to go to the homeless shelter. You know what I mean? Or they have to be really reliant on shitty guys, which makes it even worse. Right. So it's so interesting you mentioned that too, because so much of my reporting going forward, I really want to focus on post-incarceration. I tried to do that with Suave, the podcast that we won the Pulitzer for, talk a lot about parole. I think, so much is focused rightfully on people that are in prison and getting people out and the rehabilitation, but it can only go so far, if the parole system is putting people back and making it much more difficult. So I appreciate you mentioning that. I think that's so important for people to hear. Yeah, I think out of all the things, and I mean, Scott could probably even speak on this for hours, or whatever, because he was a probation officer and dealt with probation, parole, sex offenders to, unsupervised, probation, like all that stuff. And we've in North Dakota became a very, very long ways in the last 20 years from, the cuff 'em, stuff 'em era to now. I mean, I've sat in probation offices with guys that I'm trying to help in their PO. They failed 9 drug tests and they're like, well, let's give it another try. Maybe you should talk to Adam a little bit more. And I was just like, this is mind blowing. Yeah. I went to meet with my PO and I smoked weed and he was like, you're going to jail. Like, yeah. And now the guy is showing up and he was like, he tested positive for meth. He tested positive for, and it's not always that, but it's a long ways, from.
And I think a part of it is that we're recognizing that we're putting a lot of people in prison for addiction. Yeah. That we're starting to recognize that we're not doing them any favors by putting people in prison for, we're not putting the big dealers in prison. We're putting the people that are addicted to drugs, and their behavior is related to trying to take care of that habit or that disease. And I think as a collective, especially in North Dakota, I can talk to that as far as that they're really looking at that. They're very progressive in the ideas of what do we do after they get out? How do we make sure that they stay in the communities, become part of the community? And part of that is educating the employers and some of the other people that don't understand this. The people that are in it get it, but it's the people that don't understand it, that these people are coming back to our communities. 95% of the people that go to prison are getting back out. They're coming back to our communities. So
so the farther you get into this, Maggie, if you decide to do more in the post incarceration stuff, just if you got any questions or anything like that, we're not experts by any means, but on the national scale of things or whatever, North Dakota is like bleeding edge reform with a lot of the stuff we're doing. So
that's really, really good to know. I have been wondering that a lot, actually, which states are making big reforms.
Yeah. I think North Dakota usually gets a bad rap, nationally or whatever, because we just don't have a lot of people here, and anytime we make the news, it's for some bullshit. Yeah. It's never about like, oh, they're like the greatest reformers in, it's like, oh, a guy ate bath salts and ended up in Casey's gas station, or whatever. Yeah. They're like, oh, see, it's just a trailer park. It's just one big trailer park.
Yeah, it is. And it's a pull yourself up by your bootstraps kind of state where for them to be a little forward thinking in reform is like, it really is unusual. But
the other one is South Dakota. They actually put a re-entry team together. So they actually have a full team. That's what we were a part of. And they called us in to be a part of that, to kind of help them, guide them through that process. And we're still working with them on working on some contractual things where, they're bringing things to the table that they were so far behind for a long time. And they got all their people. They just rolled this out 2 weeks ago, and that's really exciting that they're actually seeing the benefits of having these reentry programs and having people in those positions.
Maggie, you're in New York, correct?
So actually, I'm in Texas now. I just moved to Austin.
Oh, okay. Well, I think that's probably better. I've never been to New York, but anytime I hear stories about it, I think I'd be a little overwhelmed with just like all the people and.
It's like so busy. You're so anonymous. It's in a crowd.
Maybe that
anyway,
would be nice.
It's so awesome. Yeah. Anyway, I just have been there once. But
so why the transition?
I'm tired. I'm old. I can't. New York really just doesn't stop, and it's a constant. It's just go, 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 constant. Party life. I just was like, I need just a pool and quiet and no one near me. So that's why I moved.
And no snow. Man,
that sounds great. Yeah.
I was wondering, what are some of the changes you've seen since you started doing this with reform or just education, really?
Yeah. So one of the things, people talk, so I would like to think what I do is I work, in the criminal legal system. Some people like to call that true crime. So what we talk about a lot in like the true crime world is that what we've seen in talking with friends that are defense attorneys and prosecutors is how much smarter the jury pools are now because they listen and watch things like your podcast and Wrongful Conviction, and they're actually not as trusting of what law enforcement says all the time. So that is a huge change that I have seen. It's just how much more the average person knows about their rights and the law, and that cops are legally allowed to lie to you to get a false confession. So I've seen that change a lot.
Yeah.
I never even thought of that.
Yeah, there's been a lot. I mean, Great North Innocence Project's been like in Minnesota, worked on jailhouse informants to, police being able to lie to get and there's a lot of false confessions that have happened or whatever because it gets really intimidating, and then you just want to say whatever you got to say just to get out of the room. I can't tell you many times. I mean, I was convicted. I mean, I legitimately committed the crimes all the ones that I was convicted for, and the interrogation. Or I mean, there's times where I'm just like, I'm going to plead guilty so I can go home. You know what I mean? Because they would come there and be like, well, you plead guilty today, and you can go home, or if you plead not guilty, you're going to have to sit here until we go to court, which is an average of 6 weeks. And it's just like, I'm just going to plead guilty. So I mean, especially if I didn't do it, I'm like, well, I guess I can just say I did it, and they'll let me go home. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So there's this.
Chicago led the way, or it was Illinois. I don't remember if it was Chicago or if it was the state of Illinois, but Brendan Dassey, who you might know, the Making a Murderer case with Stephen Avery. Brendan Dassey was a young 16-year-old kid who was interrogated for hours without an attorney, without his parents. The cops kept his parents away from him. Turns out he had an IQ of like 40-something. And confessed to this insane murder that he didn't do. So Illinois actually changed the law so police cannot lie to minors anymore, which is crazy that that's allowed actually in the rest of the country.
That was so heartbreaking to watch. This poor kid just,
Juvenile reform, I mean, it needs to happen a lot faster. Because, I mean, like even in North Dakota, we had Andrew Sadek or whatever, the juvenile informant. That was got killed while he was doing work for, and he was underage and it was over. Yeah. So it found him in the river, the lake. Yeah.
He was never, it was never charged out.
Right.
So there's a lot to it.
Yeah. There's a whole documentary on it and stuff like that. But anyways, the reason I bring that up is that they brought forth that until then you could use juveniles as informants.
Oh my gosh.
And so in North Dakota, so now you no longer can, and you have to. And then the other thing that they changed was a parent could say that they didn't want their son represented by an attorney if they were underage, because some parents will come in and be like, I'm embarrassed that this happened, just plead guilty, let's get out of it. Now we've had that reform done where it's the that by default they get representation no matter what the parents say.
Oh, that's good.
Yeah, so there's the even that side, there's a lot of stuff that's changing or whatever. So it's nice to see that juveniles are getting representation. So
yeah, I mean, so Suave, that the Pulitzer podcast I did, it was about juvenile lifers actually, and that's kind of how I got into wrongful convictions, was doing that podcast, talking with Suave, and really, building a relationship with this man who did 32 years in prison for a crime that he says he did, and just kind of like you said, Adam, like he did this crime. He was a murderer, but he changed, and I really loved this human as a person, and just thinking of the dichotomy of him committing a horrible murder and then being like, oh my gosh, you're this scholarly, educated, reformed person now. But anyway, that whole podcast was about juveniles and being mandatorily sentenced to life in prison, going all the way back to like the super predator era, and how slow that's going. I mean, they made the law in 2014, 10 years ago, that you can't mandatorily sentence juveniles to life in prison. 2017, they made it retroactive to resentence everyone. But so many states still haven't done that. There's still some states with juvenile lifers, people who were once children, sentenced to life in prison mandatorily. Yeah. So it's even when there is change, it moves so slow.
Yeah. We passed that law in North Dakota where you can't LWOP or whatever, the life without parole for juveniles. You can't do it anymore. But they did not make it retroactive because of one. I mean, it only really, the non-retroactive on it or whatever only in North Dakota affects I think 1 or 2, which is still a big deal. but it was purposely made that way because of the high, the intensity of the one guy that's in there for life without parole that committed murder when, like, it was such a high profile, like, gang affiliated shooting that killed a grandma and grandpa with sawed-off shotgun, and like,
how old was he?
He was 17. Yeah.
I think just.
Yeah, the case, Montgomery versus Alabama was Henry Montgomery. He was the guy who the whole 2014 case is based off of. And he only got out a couple of years ago. His case was so high profile. It was the murder of a cop when he was a young kid. So it was kind of incredible too to see all of these people, thousands across the country, getting out and having their cases resentenced. And Henry Montgomery was still in. That was also really interesting. He's out now. He's in his 80s now. But yeah.
Yeah. So how Maggie and I met was it's on the Great North Innocence Project. James Mayer from Great North and I went to the women's prison in North Dakota, and I wasn't even going. James called me and asked me to come with because I do work in the prisons or whatever. So he's like, it'd be nice to have someone who's familiar there or whatever. They all know who you are. I was like, yeah, sure. So we go, and I give my talk. And then James gives their spiel about the Great North Innocence Project, the application process for, to get representation, for something you may have been wrongfully convicted for. It's kind of a, it's interesting to, see, all the people, like, I'm wrongfully convicted, so it's hard to navigate through that, and so it's really nice that they have attorneys that can be objective with them. And so anyways, this young lady came up to me and she couldn't even like look me in the eye, she was just kind of looking at the floor, very quiet and soft spoken. And she was like, I'm not supposed to be here. And I hear that a lot. Sure. Right. Yeah. And I was like, well, why are you here? And she's like, I'm here for killing my baby. And I was like, oh, and someone like, it's like kind of like that's an icebreaker, right? Yeah, like it's, and I was like, so why aren't you supposed to be here? And she said, well, the autopsy report came back and said that the baby died of SIDS. And I was like, the problem with the case is that Cassandra actually believed that she did what they told her she did because she was drinking, I can't tell you how many times I know tons of parents who have had a few too many while they're watching their kids or whatever, or maybe they are on a form of medication and had one too, whatever. There's so many scenarios where that situation could have happened. Sure. And so when Cassandra woke up, her baby was dead. Yeah. And she, you just called the right people, did everything she was supposed to do. And then the cops showed up there and they arrested her. So it was, and so what she's in prison believing that she killed her baby, right? Yeah. Didn't even get the appropriate time to like mourn with the kid, like nothing. Yeah. Had her other kids taken away. Yeah. And then now has to process all this traumatic shit while locked up, believing that she actually did it. Yeah. And then she gets the fact that there was a conviction before the autopsy report came out is proof enough that there's system wide changes that need to help. I mean, it's a pig, right? Like with lipstick, like it's just there's so many different areas that you can focus on.
And I think the reform that needs to happen for women is so much. It's just different than for men because there's so many different like stereotypes. And if you're a mom, you wouldn't do this, and if you're blah blah blah, like. Women, mothers can be just as sick as the dads, but they don't, like the shame involved is a different level altogether. Yeah. So women don't ask for help. They don't get into treatment. They just power on, and then things like this happen, where it's like, sure, maybe it's neglectful, but murder, you know what I mean? Like, it's just crazy.
Well, the Great North Innocence Project worked through the whole process, got her released. She got her kids back. She's getting, all the stuff that she needs, from the community. Like, it's, the crazy thing, Maggie, is that when they announced that she was wrongfully convicted, they used her goddamn mugshot to announce to everyone. I was like, I was like, man.
Yeah.
Are you kidding me?
It was ridiculous.
Just to have us one more.
Maggie, of all the interviews that you've done with people like Cassandra, or like, what are some moments for you in those interviews where it was just like it was just like a mic drop, like it was like the most memorable one, experience that you had doing all these podcasts?
Similar to Cassie's, some of the cases that the men are involved in generally, and this is very generalized, are usually these like really wild, egregious murders, rape, sexual assault. I mean, I was talking with a guy whose own grandmother, he's still in prison. It's so devastating. Some grandmother who was getting dementia and had a vendetta against his father, put him in prison for raping her. So, I mean, just the stories, but the women, they're usually in prison for a crime that never happened, a no crime. So like Cassie, SBS is not a real thing. So crimes never even happened in these cases. And I thought this one woman, Alicia Burns, she was sex trafficked when she was 16, and her trafficker wound up murdering somebody. And she was implicated and went to prison for the crime. When she got out on parole, she was paroled out because she was 16 at the time. She got pregnant and violated parole. When she went back in, she had her baby in prison, and they took her baby from her, put her baby up for adoption, closed adoption, and she lost her child forever for a parole violation for a crime that she never even committed. And that to me was just, I will never forget that a woman lost her child forever for a parole violation of a crime that she never committed or was involved in, or might not even have happened. It's just, I can't believe that can happen here.
Yeah, she was a victim in the first place. That's how the whole thing started.
Yep.
Anyway, it's so gross.
Mm.
Anyway.
Yeah, that one really haunts me. But Cassie is similar. Cassie lost her child, goes to prison for killing her child, and I know she's had a rough go since she's been out. I mean, it's really tough. I saw Jim at the Innocence Conference, and we were talking about it. And once you, as you all know, once you go in, it is so hard to get out and stay out because they don't make it easy to do that. So I think a lot of those cases, women like Cassie and Alicia, who are victims from the beginning, it's so horrible and so tragic.
Yeah, it's very difficult, especially, I mean, being, a woman with kids, Native American in North Dakota, I don't think it'd be fair for me to go in too much detail about her, like personal stuff now, but it's, like I was sharing earlier about the reentry stuff. Like, I don't have a car, I don't have IDs, I don't have, when people, and even for her, like, even though she does not have that record, the court records still exist. Sure. And it doesn't, like, when you look at court records, it doesn't, unless you know what you're reading, it doesn't necessarily, make it look like it was wrongful conviction. It looks like what the crime, you know what I mean? And so even the background checks and the, these mugshot harvesting companies, like all that stuff, she still has to go through all of that.
Not to mention find daycare, be paid less than men for a job that's harder to get. She can't just walk on a site and get a job. I mean, it's just like so difficult. But they think like, well, you shouldn't have those kids if you don't want to pay for daycare. Stuff like that. And I'm like, well, why aren't we blaming the dad for this? Or you know what I mean? It's just such a different. Yeah. It's different. Yeah. Anyway, my passion is women. I wish I could do so much more for them.
She's amazing. So we have this opportunity gala that we do once a year, and it's like our big, fundraiser. So anyways, Cassie showed up, and she was like all dolled up and stuff. I was like, look at you. Damn, what's up? And I was like, she was like super uncomfortable, and I would be too, like if I wasn't, built the way that I am, like mentally. And so anyways, there, like the hors d'oeuvres table is right there, and I was like, Cassie, you want to get some hors d'oeuvres? And she's like, what the fuck is that? And I was like, it's just shit that fancy people, it's snacks. That's all it is. And she was like, yeah. And so we just sat there and just like shot the shit or whatever at the back of the, and so it was nice to see her there. But, you guys got any questions or whatever? No. Okay. Maggie, is there anything that you want to spotlight before we let you jump off? Any websites, podcast channels, anything like that?
We are, let's see, season 3 of Wrongful Conviction just launched. So we're in the middle of that, and that's where Cassie's case. Did it air yet? I think it did.
Yeah, it did. I think 2 weeks ago it did.
Yeah. So that's where Cassie's case is, where you can hear her episodes. There are some really heartbreaking ones this season. One more thing, speaking of women, actually, is I had a couple cases last season, which is really horrible when you think there are cases that are so similar. And I had 2 in one season of women who were convicted of child sex crimes during the Satanic Panic era, specifically lesbian women, like having little kids accuse them of sex crimes that never happened, is also just freaking horrible. And just while I was thinking of season 3, I've had a couple. One was a bus driver, and this whole town came up with this conspiracy that she was like sexually abusing all these children. Another one was very similar. She was a daycare provider. So again, I just thinking of women and children, it's really scary. But no, so season, you can listen to those episodes on season 3 and season 4. We are in the works now. It's coming out September.
Cool.
Thank you. Oh my gosh, you're doing such good work for people. I absolutely.
Yeah, thank you for using your voice. Thank you for staying in it all these years and still dedicating your life to getting the, voices heard of those who are unseen. And we appreciate that.
Super smart, smoking hot. You are you're a big deal, for real.
Thank you.
She's female.
Thanks,
she can say shit like that.
We can't say
I can't. That. I'm like, you. And then someone will clip it and they'd be like, see, we told you Adam's piece of shit. It's like,
you're beautiful inside and out.
Yeah.
Thank you. Well, no, it's really great to talk to y'all. I will be in touch because I actually do want to do a lot more in the reentry world. I think that's a area that we just don't cover, and I'm trying to figure out how to do it, especially with women. So I would really love to stay in touch for sure.
Yeah, reach out anytime.
Yeah, and I think that's part of what you said earlier about the barriers that people run into, and that's our main goal, is to try to figure out ways to help people through these barriers and I think it's an education thing too, making people educated about all the barriers that they do run into and how difficult it really can be to get back into the communities.
Just giving
absolutely.
That,
and people
go ahead.
No, go ahead.
Or giving that quote on the throwaway part of society, giving them a voice is such a huge thing. Because like you were saying when it started, just let somebody allowing you to be a part of their story or hear their story is such a big deal. And then to
such a big deal.
Have enough leverage to give them a voice to be heard, then people are like, well, that can't be happening. Well, it is happening. Nobody ever asked, though, because they assume, well, if they're a criminal, they should have to work harder to get back inside. That's crazy. That's bananas thinking.
I love when people say shit like that. And I'm like, because I'm a criminal, I work harder than you. You know what I mean?
Real.
So what I say,
I know, it's silly.
I'm just uber competitive. I don't know if you know that.
Really? I didn't know that.
It doesn't matter. That's a whole nother podcast, self-value. Anyway, Maggie, we appreciate you. For those listening, season 3, Wrongful Conviction, got some bomb-ass episodes coming out, and make sure you check them out. I'm pretty sure they're available. I mean, I follow her on Spotify. It's probably on all the major streaming stations, so be sure to check her out. Maggie, thank you for your time. Thank you for everything you do.
Thank you for your time.
Thanks, y'all. I really appreciate it.
That was an awesome episode.
Yeah.
Maggie is legit.
Yeah, I like her a lot.
I wish we had more journalists like that are willing to get, deep into those topics of, well, she said true crime. I never heard it called true crime. I just call it criminal justice reform and stuff like that. Yeah. So how are you guys? Good?
No, I think I was super fascinated. I could have talked to her forever. She was really interesting.
Yeah.
And the work she's doing with
women. You were
women,
swooning over her.
I know.
Yeah.
I love anybody that's advocating for women, but
yeah.
And Inked Up, seriously, love it.
Oh, so you love yourself.
I do. I just like seeing it reflected in other people. Yeah.
You're a female. I'm a female.
Yeah.
You're tatted. I'm tatted. We're fucking amazing.
We're sisters.
Samesies. Yeah.
Sisters.
Anyway, but like what were you thinking when she was talking about the reform for the legal stuff and probation?
Yeah, you look like there was a couple times where you were like getting uncomfortable.
Well, I think sometimes it gets into, it's like everything else, it's like just what we talk about on the Justice Impacted. Everybody gets thrown into this bunch that this is what everybody does, that, and part of it,
like
I think
the whole all cops are bad cops. Which we don't agree with. Yeah,
right.
100%.
And there's, yes, that those ways that they were in the past, there was a lot of things that they did that were very unethical,
At the time,
but they were
sense.
thinking they were trying to do they were trying to do the right thing.
Yeah.
Because this person did it, and I think part of it is, when we were talking about, like, even some of the cases that, a lot of times people get the wrong idea that it's the cops that charge people.
Yeah.
They always say, "Oh, the cops charged me." It's like, well, the cops really didn't charge you. They arrested you. Yeah. But the charges come from the prosecutors, from attorneys.
Yeah.
So I think sometimes that always gets me kind of, because like the cop doesn't sit there and go, "I'm arresting that person because I have the authority, I'm charging that person," I guess. They make the arrest, but they're not the ones that determine if there's charges, if they're going to charge it or not.
Yeah.
So I think sometimes that's what I wanted to clarify with her, because she said there was a point where they talked about the cops were arrested, or, the cops charged them. And it's like, no, that's not right. The cops don't charge them, so.
Just proving that there's so much education that needs to happen.
And that's what I was talking about too, is, it's just educating people. It's educating, law enforcement. It's educating the probation officers, the parole officers, that whole avenue, I think, has changed as far as them wanting, it's not about, I always tell, like, the people we work with too, is most probation officers don't get into, they're not looking just to arrest people. They really want to help people, because if they were just wanted to arrest people, they would have became cops, and you see a lot of people making different changes where their job is more complex in the fact that they're actually trying to help people too, so, but public safety has to come first, and that's, sometimes that gets misconstrued as far as they just want to arrest people, and and there are some, again. So
there's going to be douchebags in every profession.
Right.
Yeah.
Just like the lawyers and.
Wow. You went right to the lawyers. Okay.
Yeah. That was quick crossover. Is there a quota that police have to make? Okay, because that is a misconception that they have to arrest so many people every month.
No.
You're telling me that that the highway patrol do not have a quota.
I can't speak to that because I was never a highway patrolman. All I can tell you is I've talked to many, and there's always this misrepresentation that I have to have 27 arrests. What they look at is what are they doing? Mm-hmm. There's a lot of people doing things wrong out there, like driving drunk and speeding, and those are the things that they look at. What is there? But as far as you have to write out 72 citations in the month, as far as I know, there's nothing like that.
Not around here.
Not around
at
here,
least. Yeah.
That I know of.
Anyway, total side note. But I was thinking about that the other day. I thought, I wonder if there is actually a quota.
You should, next time you get pulled over, and be like, "Oh, I'm glad I helped your quota."
Yeah, don't do that, because that's usually will get you a ticket for sure. I try to tell people, like, I have one guy tell me, he's like, he's in recovery, and he's like, "I was always an asshole to cops. I'd roll the window down a little bit this way, and I said, how is that working out for you? And he said, not very well.
Yeah.
You know, and then I said, why don't you, next time you get stopped, you roll the window down completely. You treat him like a human being. If he's disrespectful to you, then granted, you can do the same. But treat him really nice once. Try that. Kill him with kindness. And he come back about a month later. He goes, I got pulled over again, and I did what you said. And he was really a nice dude.
Yeah, I know. I always say, just tell him you don't have a gag reflex. I've never had a speeding ticket in my life.
Oh.
I got pulled over in Alexandria. I was going, I think it meant Minnesota 70 or whatever. I was probably going 78 or something like that. And I had great grandma in the car with me, and Christy's son in the, and so I was like, I got pulled over. And I was like, oh crap, and so he pulls me over. I'm super, I was like, thank you. Here's my ID or whatever. He comes back and he was like, I'm just gonna give you a warning. I was like, I appreciate that, thank you. And he's like, can I ask you a question? And I was like, yeah. He's like, are you Adam Martin from F5 Project? And I was like, why, yes, I am.
Yeah. Did that just get me out of this ticket?
Yeah. But it was perfect because it was like I had witnesses. They were like, and so it was Alexandria too, which we have no operations out there. So that was kind of cool. It would be cool if it happened in like Iowa.
Yeah.
Or like Texas or something like that. Nebraska.
Are you the Adam Martin? I am.
Yeah.
That's cool.
I almost responded. I was like, depends.
Yeah, I know.
What do you want from me?
Yeah.
Is there still a warrant out?
Yeah.
So, good episode. This was awesome.
Yeah, she's amazing.
Want to make sure you check out her podcast, Maggie Freleng, with the Wrongful Convictions podcast, going into season 3. Some really awesome episodes coming out.
I'm going to listen to it on the way to Minot.
Yeah, it's a good idea.
Heading to Minot after
you
this.
could probably listen to her entire podcast.
Yeah.
That's a long drive.
It is such a oh my gosh.
We love Minot.
Yeah, we love Minot. We just don't love the drive.
Yeah.
Which drive is even worse? The drive from Sioux Falls to
Pierre.
Oh my gosh.
Or Pierre to Dickinson.
That
was horrible.
It was like oh my god. It's like that part of
what?
America right there is just like beautiful. It's beautiful out there. But there's nothing.
Yeah.
Like it is.
If you break down, you break down.
Yeah. If you're like gonna meditate and need to go for a drive, that like I could understand a motorcycle on but holy cow, that's a drive. So want to thank our sponsors, F5 Project, the Ridge Treatment and Reentry Center, GoWayBear.com.
Go Way Bear.
And Heat Transfer Warehouse and Shirts from Fargo. Thank you all for sponsoring us. Thank our followers, our subscribers, everybody. Thank you, Scott, Kirsten, and the magnificent Pretty Ricky, who's not here today.
Hope little Ricky's doing better.
Yeah, hope the little guy's doing better. Which he
digs
sounded
are
like
cool.
he broke his fever. So,
That's cool.
But yeah, and then obviously John Ostos with Metroflex and H&I Nutrition for letting us use this podcast station.
And smoking cigars.
I don't think they smoke in here.
I know they don't. That was a joke.
There's a lot of cigars right there.
I know.
Yeah. Anyway, thank you to our sponsors. Thank you for Darby for being amazing and doing all the video capture and audio and supporting us. So appreciate all of you. Thank you for following us. And that's how the cookie crumbles. Have a good day.